record changed my life as a youngster. It's the greatest live album I think ever made. The first band ever to do like songs that were like, 14 minutes long and stuff. Which I think is great.
Great.
Yeah. It's anti-pop all the way. Well, they had a huge hit. That's what broke them here.
Right, which was
Roundabout.
So does that song Roundabout, does that like fit their genre generally, or is it a little bit outside of it?
Well, it's a little more straightforward.
Okay.
Compared to like some of the other more intense stuff, but it does. I mean, you'll hear that, then you'll hear any other Yes song, and it's absolutely sounds like Yes.
Yeah.
They just did a commercial thing. It was the bass part. It's one of the greatest bass lines. One of the top 100 or something greatest bass lines ever recorded or something like that.
Okay.
On something somewhere.
Said someone.
Yeah, I think it might have been like Rolling Stones. Stone, I think. I don't, Rolling Stone. But I could be wrong there too. It might have been Cream magazine or a Circus magazine or something.
Yeah, who knows.
Now this album, Yessongs. This is the cool. Look at this thing. First off,
yeah, show us.
This is the original album that my brother John got. I'd say this album came out 72, I think. Well, 73 is when the album came out. I think it's from the 72 tour, right?
Okay.
And most of the songs that are on here were recorded studio album wise 71, 70, 69. I think was like.
Well, and you said that he actually saw this concert.
I think so. I think
right?
John saw this concert.
Yeah.
So I mean, when they were on tour in the States, and I was about 7, it's probably almost 8. So this is 73, so I would have been roughly that. I don't want to tell you my age, but So it was like I heard this, I was like, wow. And this is the original album he got. It's a 3-record set. Look at this. It just keeps on opening, and you get all these awesome, great pictures. There's the mountains falling out of the sky, so a planet explodes, right? And then you've got that's what that is. Those were that was like, and there's a person sitting up there. This guy named, I think his name was Roger Dean, a guy who did all the artwork for almost all the Yes albums. So yeah, it's look at this picture on the back.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's the deer right there, and then I just thought that was a cool picture. Look at this picture right here. There's the bat. I used to love that picture. That's basically a piece of a planet, man. But it's alive.
Looks like a mushroom.
It's alive. Yeah, it kind of looks like a mushroom thing. Well, that's early 70s. Everything looked like
Everything's a mushroom. Yeah.
And then inside the album, I can show you this. You think you're going, oh, well, 3-record set, this great album cover. What more what do we need? I'll tell you what you need. You need the booklet that comes with it. And this is all the original stuff. I mean, it's been it's mostly been in my possession since, whenever late 70s probably is when I snuck into my record collection out of my brother's record collection.
Right.
And if you look at this picture, it's kind of hard to tell. There's the band, and there's, of course, Wakeman over there, all silver.
Yeah.
All shiny. There's Anderson, there's Squire, there's Hal, there's Alan White back there on drums. But, so take a look again.
Yeah, so what else is in here?
So there's Steve Howe, guitar player. So each guy gets his own page times 2. He's playing his lap steel, and he's doing this classical. Yeah, he's awesome. And then there's John Anderson, world's greatest high vocal guy singer. Yeah, great musician too. And then we've got Alan White, the newest member of the band. He joined during this tour. So a few of these tracks on this album still have Bill Bruford, one of the greatest drummers that everybody knows. He was still with him at the time.
Yeah.
Eventually changed the drum solo was him. Then we have your basic Chris Squire.
What?
There
He's
he is
got
with
the
that
most
cape.
Pictures.
Yeah, he got a lot of pictures. Well, I'm sure he demanded that.
He's kicking.
Yeah, here's jumping. There's the cape. Always had the cape. I mean, look at that. How could you, after seeing that picture, how could you not have a cape and be on stage?
I mean, yeah.
I would have one right now. And then, of course, Wakeman, child prodigy. Let me look at this picture right here. There's a mini Moog. There's a couple of mini Moogs. You can see them both back there. See the control board from. He's playing. Looks like probably Hammond Hammond bass pedals. I have Taurus pedals at home. And there's a good shot of all his keyboards and stuff. I mean, this was like 1972 on tour, state of the art.
Very
you couldn't,
cool.
But they had all the heavy duty stuff. They had the big Leslie and everything. And there's the sound crew. Eddie Offord, this guy who produced a lot of their records. That's the guy right there. He did a lot of prog rock stuff, as a matter of fact. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I sat there and just like looked through this book and looked through the pictures. You know, it was like my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this album has seen a lot of love.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, what is the story behind like prog rock? How did that start? When did that start?
Oh, yeah, it's kind of hard to say because most of these prog rock bands were around since like they all started in the late '60s,
Okay.
right? But no one really, but the '60s aren't known for prog rock. It's really the '70s where it starts to kick in. And so you had like Genesis and yes, and you had Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And then you had other bands a little later like Kansas and Rush. But yeah, so most of these bands were these guys were probably mostly still doing covers and stuff in the '60s.
Okay.
They started coming out with their stuff. It was like an explosion of music and stuff in the late '60s, right?
Yeah.
And then these guys, bands like this, really started coming to front and center like in the early '70s.
Yeah.
And so I think Yes had a hit with Roundabout in like '71. I mean, it was like 6, so I don't totally remember, but I think it is. This is a '72 tour, and then this album probably I think it says it came out in '73.
Okay.
So, yeah, a lot of them when they first came out didn't really sound that proggy. You know what I mean? Proggy. These are all
Yeah. What
words.
does that mean? What? So what is
Progressive,
prog?
progressive rock, right?
Okay.
So it's like it's rock with a little more to play. It's not your basic 3-chord, 8-chord rock.
A
right?
little more to play.
Yeah, you've got to like a lot of these songs on here might start off as simple songs. Like John Astor saw him live one time saying, he goes, "Yeah, I wrote this one," and he goes, "Yeah, I had this simple little song, and then I gave it to these guys, and they beefed it up."
Yeah.
And it's like that was the joke that he kept on saying because that's what they did with everything he wrote.
Right.
So John Astor was the singer, and yeah, and beef it up they did. I mean, listen to something like Heart of the Sunrise on here, and there's like, I mean, it's all the stuff going on, but there's a basic song in the middle of it, that you hear.
Right.
But it's put together seamlessly, flawlessly. It's probably about a 7-minute, 8-minute song.
Right. The idea is to kind of like complicate a song as much as possible, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're like bands like Yes, being one of the early, to me the best prog rock band, progressive rock band ever. But they were like really classical influenced. So you hear a lot of this classical stuff. I mean, you think of Rick Wakeman, he was very classical.
Okay.
Chris Squire was very harmonic in his bass playing. I mean, really harmonic. Steve Howe is just from another planet. His guitar playing. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how you play that well. And then those vocals and everything, almost like it's almost like choir. Like this pretty high.
Right.
It's real high, but it's very pretty setting voice. John Anderson's voice.
Yeah.
Really clean, really high. And these guys, they were classically influenced, so they had this trying to create, like in a classical piece, you call it a movement. That was what their idea, I think, was. They were trying to create like a movement on every album, like several movements on each album.
Okay.
They had like close to the album, close to the edge is all one side is one song, right? But you have different movements of that song.
Right. And so this album is this like all the music from this concert, basically? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it may be, the liner notes escape me a little bit, but it might be several during this tour. I mean, they were basically playing, I want to say, really large theaters.
Yeah.
Small, maybe stadium events, things like that. They're probably playing bigger places. Well, everything was bigger here in the States. So if you played one place there, you were bound to sell 3 times the amount of seats here if you were well known in either in England or in the States. They're from England, right? That's kind of where prog rock was born.
Okay.
So yeah, not to be confused with glam rock.
Yes.
I just throw that in there in case anybody wanted to know.
Glam rock is you
it's...
look beautiful while playing rock.
Exactly. Yeah. You look really beautiful and cool and colorful.
Yeah. Sequined.
And sequined.
Makeup.
And although these guys are, wearing a lot of sequins too.
Yeah.
They did back then, and capes. Can't go wrong with a cape. But what they were playing was maybe a little more than 50 trillion times more difficult than your average glam rock band. And I like glam rock too, don't get me wrong. Love Sweet. It's great band. Now, a lot of people will call Pink Floyd a prog band as well. I don't really put them in the same category. They're a little different. They're kind of their own thing.
Okay.
But they do have some, because they do big concept albums too.
Right.
Some of their albums were basically the same thing, one whole side. Wish You Were Here, or Animals, and that stuff. There's very long songs, fill a whole album side.
Yeah.
With little breakups in there, parts where it breaks apart for a second. But not really. I mean, they were very slow and, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you can really sit back with the headphones and just, tune out with those guys. These guys, you're like, damn, it's like a lot going on.
Right.
So
why is this record like important to you, I guess?
Well, as I might have told you this story before, I remember hearing it. My brothers was, made me listen to instruments and everything like that, and I'd be listening to stuff and trying to hear maybe the bass. And I really couldn't hear it on, part of it was the stereo systems too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I couldn't really tell exactly what it was doing. And then I first heard this album and he was playing this. I'm like, man, what is that sound? And John's like, that's Chris Squire. That's the bass. That's Chris Squire. He doesn't sound like anybody else. And he doesn't. That's so unique sounding on this album.
Yeah.
In all their stuff, he had this sound that, nobody else had.
Right.
A few guys were starting to tap on this, but I mean, he really created this sound. I mean, he put it to the sound of the bass sound of Roundabout, which is the same sound in all their songs. But I mean, you could hear it loud and clear. This slightly distorted tone, aggressive.
So what is different about it? Is it the tone, or is it the way he's playing, or
a little of both? Because he was like really aggressive on the bass playing wise. Doesn't mean he was like playing super fast or a lot of notes all the time. He just played the bass very hard. He used a pick, right? So he kind of used a little bit of his thumb in there, and he pushed it like a certain way.
Yeah.
And so it was the sound. He played a Rickenbacker 4001. He's got the old Rickenbacker bass. And then I think he threw Marshall amps back then and other stuff later on. But that bass has had a sound that didn't sound like really most other Rickenbackers. It did. It just sounded a little bit more over the edge as far as the Rickenbacker bass sound goes. So it's like, if you heard McCartney playing the Rickenbacker in the 60s with the Beatles, he had flat wound strings, and he used a pick too, but it was just, he played very, not that hard. He muted a lot.
Yeah.
Whole different ball game with Squire. Round wound strings. And I guess when round wound strings, because Rickenbackers were sold with flats, as most basses were, up until probably the mid 70s.
Yeah.
And then when everybody heard these guys, everybody wanted to sound like Chris Squire. And they started changing their strings and putting round wounds on the Rick basses. They were immediately chewing up the frets and stuff. They were sending them back to the factory.
Right.
To get them refretted and all this kind of stuff. They were still under warranty.
Yeah.
Right? Because they weren't really made for that. So Rickenbacker said, if you put round ones, you void your warranty. After that, so they took the guy that was probably selling more basses for him than anybody at that time.
Yeah.
And said, you can't do that. You buy our bass. But they were just more concerned about their warranty work than they were about,
Yeah.
About,
like, we can't replace every instrument here,
yeah.
people. So Chris Squire was like a real inspiration to you then as a bass player.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I started playing later on, that was some of the, of course I started with easy stuff like Kiss or the Beatles or stuff like that. Then some Led Zeppelin and things like that. And then I really started listening to Yes, and starting with maybe the easier songs of Yes, like possibly Roundabout, None of them are really easy.
Right.
But some are not as hard to play,
Yeah.
And then, I'm trying to get that sound. I still have it, my old jazz bass, Fender jazz bass, and my brother Jim's. And I could get close to it,
Yeah.
Just Squire's sound is kind of overdriven, really bright, bottom endy, and it's the coolest sound.
So what about this album makes it like special, interesting?
Well, it's a great sounding live album. I mean, most live albums are kind of muddy and there's things lacking. This album sounds really good. It's like, it sounds very alive.
Yeah.
For one thing, you hear a lot of room, but you can still hear everybody.
Yeah.
And it all has thump. Especially back then, things were light on the low end, right? They got better, but things like drum stuff were low.
Yeah.
And Alan White's drums are just, coming through loud and clear, you know. And they use some cool effects. He used phasing and stuff, a phaser, like on the drums sometimes. It's kind of cool, even in the live show. So it's on the record when you listen to it. And I always liked the band live because they had a little bit different sound. They were very tight, super tight band, and then their studio stuff, especially the old stuff, was almost at times kind of like choppy sounding. Not choppy, but just it was so tight and intricate. You could hear every little thing. It felt a little looser live.
Okay, yeah.
So they had this kind of it maybe flowed a little better. It might have been Alan White's drumming. He was new to the band. He joined during this tour, and Alan White. You know, he played with John Lennon before that, so he's the guy who played on Imagine, Plastic Ono Band, all that kind of stuff. I got to talk to him.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. I asked him, of course, what was it like playing with John Lennon?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, you know, yeah, he was the leader. There's no doubt about that. He was definitely like the leader.
Are there some parts from the record that you want to play for us?
Yeah. Leave it at that. No. Well, let's see. So that would be the easiest thing he sings in this song. The lowest thing, maybe. This part of the song. But,
yeah, he
great
has.
song.
Yeah, it's quite a voice.
Yeah, it's like an angel voice.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Now, you think about this, you know, nothing here was fixed. There's no auto-tune, no melody.
Right.
There's no cut and paste editing. It's like what you're hearing was them live. And, you know, and there's a few mistakes on here. You can hear them throughout there, a couple bass mistakes. A couple places where his voice cracks.
Yeah.
You know, that's about it.
Yeah.
You know, throughout the whole album.
It's really impressive.
You know, those background vocals of Squire. It's Squire and Howe singing background. Chris Squire, great singer. Guy singing like a bird. And the stuff he was singing while playing. You know, it's like, great. Super high, accurate, just right on the note. Yeah, I think he's singing choir or something. I might have read before. But really, really nails it. And he was always flawless.
Yeah.
I've seen these guys about 8 or 9 times. Maybe, probably not. But they were always, he just always delivered, you know, bass and vocals. And he always sounded great. You know, and he always had one of the best, like, lighting, you know, shows and laser shows. First laser I ever saw were at the 90125.
Right.
You know, that's the name of the album. Tour.
So they were like kind of cutting edge in terms of like technology.
Oh yeah, they were always way ahead of it. And prog rock for the time, like in the 70s, was big business. It stayed that way throughout the 70s till about 1980. Punk was out, new wave was more refined version of that.
Yeah.
And things were starting to change. You know, the other stuff, AC/DC and things like that, and that kind of rock was always there. Always had a big audience, but everybody that's went to those shows basically went to these shows too.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they would pair bands back then. At least back in the 60s especially, they would pair bands that should have never been put together. They just didn't really care. To them, rock and roll was rock and roll. The promoters didn't know any better. One of the biggest that everybody will know, just drop this in, it's like the Jimi Hendrix opening for the Monkees on tour. They were on tour with him.
Wow.
Until I think they finally realized, or Hendrix realized, that this just wasn't working.
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah, he was playing to 13-year-old girls.
Right.
You know, and his music definitely wasn't meant for that.
Yeah.
And I love the Monkees. I love Hendrix.
Yeah, but they're just not supposed to be on the same bill.
They should be on the same stage.
Yeah.
Unless they're doing a duet. There's that 12-string guitar, Steve Howe. So this was, the studio album was just like a 12-string acoustic. You know. Yeah, it was really hard to mic acoustic stuff back then, live. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
By necessity, a lot of times these guys would just play an electric guitar part. Acoustic, yeah. And stage things like that. And everything's grown, you know. These guys probably had a crew of about 5 people, 6 people.
No.
Yeah, I mean, probably around this time they did.
What?
Yeah,
How
I mean,
could you put on a
I'm
production
sure
like
that grew by the late 70s. I probably grew to about 30 or 40 guys.
Yeah.
And then plus, the locals that
Right.
that's all the muscle when you're doing a show.
Yeah.
He misses that one last note there. He doesn't want the studio cut. I actually like it better here. If you listen to what you normally listen to with your age group or whatever, you've never heard anything like this.
Was there anything else you want to play for us?
Great bass, greatest band, greatest album.
Greatest album.